Good morning, everyone. And on behalf of my company, Intel Corporation, I appreciate the opportunity to introduce Tony Scott this morning as your keynote speaker. As we all know, Tony serves as the CIO of the federal government. He was named to this position in February of 2015 by President Obama and has, over a short period of time, made significant leadership contributions to the federal and contractor IT community. Similar to my company's strong focus on driving value through the execution of key strategies, such as the continuation of Moore's Law, Tony has provided this type of laser focus to key government initiatives. He told us when he first started that he wanted to make sure government was making the right IT investments to drive value and efficiency. He wanted to see government enhance digital services for our citizens, and he wanted to ensure protection of our citizen and government assets and data. We've seen Tony's influence in multiple areas. Within a short period of time, as the federal CIO, Tony initiated the 30-day cybersecurity sprint to promote agency adoption and effective deployment of multiple enhanced cyber programs and practices. And fortunately for us, Tony continues to include cyber as a top federal IT priority. He's led OMB's development and guidance regarding agency FATARI implementation, including support of OMB category management initiatives. And Tony has also been a strong champion, both within the executive branch and to Congress, regarding government benefits when modernizing legacy IT systems. Intel is very pleased to see Tony's focus in these areas and drawing upon his commercial industry expertise in trying to educate and communicate government on these benefits. As an example, or similar to Intel's focus, he really is looking at highlighting how legacy IT systems are really draining our budgets and the benefits, cost savings, improved security posture, and how the offering of new services will help with innovative infrastructures and modernized applications will really benefit the government. And many of us have read Tony's bio, and I would propose to you that I read it more than once. But specifically, we know that he graduated from the University of San Francisco with an undergrad degree. He went on and pursued his JD at the Santa Clara University. And since then, he has held many leadership roles in various large commercial organizations, and many of those are all senior IT leadership roles. So what I thought I would like to do, though, is highlight the results that those companies delivered to the marketplace when Tony was in those senior roles, because I think they're pretty interesting. While Tony was the CTO at General Motors from 1999 to 2005, GM, I think this is very interesting. GM was known to be one of the first large corporations to begin using B2B procurement. So this was the first wave of the internet, and here's a large corporation putting its supply chain and exposing it or making it dependent upon that first wave of the internet adoption. And I think, Tony, you adopted the word marketplace, correct? You're the ones that introduced the concept of an automated marketplace. During his time as CIO of Disney, from 2005 to 2008, Disney embraced on its first of three legs to enhance internal innovation when they purchased Pixar Animation. And while you may want to ask Tony questions about what it was really like to work with Steve Jobs, and you could maybe do that during the break, what stands out to me is the transformation that Disney started during this time frame, and again, the contributions that Tony was able to make in his senior leadership position. I anticipate the same type of innovative yet pragmatic leadership was required during Tony's tenure as the CIO for Microsoft. And at VMware, the position he held from 2013 to 2015, we know that Tony was very focused on accelerating IT services to advance VMware's time to market, product time to market. For those of us either supporting the government or working for the government, we can recognize that Tony has brought a very strong skill set to the CIO position and some very, very broad and deep industry experiences. He understands the value of secure, modernized infrastructures and applications, the importance of innovation, and the benefits of adopting new compute models and technologies. And fortunately for all of us, he's educating the government in many of these areas. We look forward to hearing his perspectives today on cloud computing and how the government's continued adoption of cloud may advance its broader initiatives. And with that, please join me in welcoming Tony.
Thank you so much. Wow. I had no idea any of this was coming, by the way. I'm not sure I would have come this morning. It's kind of like when you have a significant birthday and your family all gets together and talks about, their relationship to you and so on. There's, in all of those stories, some good and bad and actually some ugly in there as well. And I think the thing that I've learned is that there's no journey that you go on that isn't full of both successes but also failures and lots of learning along the way. And in each of those things that were just mentioned, my recollection is there were some great moments and then some hand-wringing, hair-pulling, sort of very anxious moments along the way. You asked about working with Steve Jobs, and I'll just tell one quick story on that because it's actually one of my fondest memories. When we bought Pixar, of course, they were an all-Apple shop, and we were pretty much a Microsoft Windows organization in the Walt Disney Company. And I was absolutely sure we were just going to have a riot on our hands when we went up and met with the folks up at Pixar. And I waited about 6 or 8 weeks after the acquisition was complete. We had to keep a hands-off relationship while the regulatory stuff was going through. But about 6 or 8 weeks after the acquisition was complete, I went up to Emeryville, and they had staged a town hall meeting. And the topic was for me to talk about, how we were going to manage IT in Pixar. And I walked into the town hall and we got a standing ovation. And I thought, well, that's a little unusual. Is this the, riot before the storm here, or what's going to happen? And here's what I discovered. Steve believed that everybody should just be able to manage their own computer. And so there was no IT support at all. And because Pixar was a small company, they didn't have any agreement with the larger Apple Corporation to support the products. You couldn't get spare parts, replacement power supplies, all the things that people need if you're going to use computers. You need lots of support, even of the best of equipment. And the moment we took over, we brought Pixar into our corporate support program. We did have a significant but not overwhelming amount of Apple products. All of our media people all used Apple, and all the advertising people and so on. And so immediately they could get replacement power cords. If the machine broke, they could turn it in and get one replaced. We had people there who could, if you weren't a techie and didn't want to do stuff yourself, you could go to somebody and actually get support. And it was a revealing moment to me that one shouldn't assume anything, that if you pay attention to the basics and do what works, success can come from that. So we ended up having a really good relationship, and I think in the case of the Pixar employees, none of their fears came true. Although we did have a small number of people who said, "Can I please have a Windows machine?" And so we satisfied that as well. mostly in the finance and accounting departments, I'll say. But at any rate, that's my Disney story for the moment. But it was actually, it ended up being a great relationship. And a very fine, although Mickey Mouse kind of company. So, got to throw that in. All right, I think we're here to talk about cloud. And do you guys have a timer? Because I need somebody who, okay, good, I can see the timer up there, great. I don't want to abuse my time here. One of the other things I've noticed, I've followed Jerry Connolly a few times, and for some reason he always leaves before I get to thank him for his support on the Hill. And it's a prelude to my wanting to thank many people for the tremendous support and help that I've gotten in the last year and a half. All of the things that you've read about, all the things that you've heard about are really around people leaning in and helping move the ball and move the needle forward. And as Jerry said, I think so eloquently, everybody understands that this is now a critical issue in the federal government, that everything we do as a federal government is heavily dependent on information systems to deliver the mission that all of us have. And whether you're a supplier, whether you're in the federal government, or whether you're in the press covering what we're doing and participating in the dialogue, I think there's good alignment, if not great alignment, that it's now time to do something about this. And continuing to do kind of what we've always done is probably not going to get us where we really want to go. So I do appreciate all the support. One of the things that I want to make sure we completely understand is a little bit of how we got here. And it's obvious to me that there's a mix of things that we can do to affect the outcomes going forward. Some of it is legislative, as Jerry pointed out. Some of it is good and better engineering. Some of it is actions that CIOs and their teams can take. And it's not just one of those things. But I do want to point out one of the primary causes of the problem that we've got, which I think is going to have to change over time. And that is our funding model and our funding scheme for IT in the federal government. So I'm going to ask you to raise your hand in a second. Do you think you have a good understanding, no matter what your role is, of how IT is funded in the federal government? Could you do kind of the fourth grade sort of explanation of how it happens? Raise your hand. Okay, good. So I'm going to just do a minute or two on how this works, because I think it'll help you relate to and understand the problem. Steve, how many people do you think are in the room here?
300 maybe?
300, okay. So there's about 7,000 different programs that get funded in the federal government. And each one of those programs either has existed for a long time or might even be a new program. But what happened at some point in time is that program got an investment that allowed them to automate their business processes. As Jerry pointed out, some of that took place during the Johnson administration. Some of that took place in the various Bush administrations. Some took place in the Carter administration, and you can go through history. But that initial investment was in automation. And I'll distinguish automation as being just the applying computer technology to what were manual processes. So think about adding numbers faster. Think about taking a paper form and creating a screen that you basically fill in the same information, whether it's a green screen or a web page or whatever. That's just automation. So we had all these investments. We're up to 7,000 now across the federal government. And once that initial automation took place and the initial investment took place, what happens the next year? You get maintenance funding. That's what you get. And that's what happens the next year. That's what happens the next year, and that's what happens the next year after that. So for 7,000 investments in the current budget year, there's an maintenance level of funding that's taken place across all our federal agencies. Okay? And a rough rule of thumb I can give you is for every $1,000 invested initially, you're going to pay about 15 to 20% maintenance cost for that investment every year. This is in the form of software licenses, maintenance contracts, operational expenses, and so on. Rough rule of thumb. It can vary, some, but across the board, that's a pretty good measure. So you invest $1,000, and every year you pay $150 to say $200, $250 to keep that thing going. That's the 80% of the federal budget that Jerry was talking about. The 80% of the $80 billion, most of that goes to maintenance and operations of stuff that exists today. So you're a CIO and you want to do something about that. Or you're the federal CIO. You got to go to 7,000 programs and say, hey, I want to do something different. How well do you think that works? You want to start a food fight with 7,000 people? Or do you even want to try to get 30 or 40 or 50 of them together, which might be a typical small agency sort of load, and say, all right, I want you 50 people to give up part of your budget so we can do the right thing. So we can save money, so we can consolidate a data center or whatever. You can do it. Good luck. Because what every program manager will understand is that budget is what is the lifeblood of their agency, their program, their whatever. And anything that's going to cripple or hinder or keep them from doing what they want to do that year is going to be seen as a big obstacle. So it's not an insignificant challenge. And we can stand at podiums like this all the time and say, we should do this, or we should do that, or we should do the other thing. But you got to have a plan. You got to have a mechanism that allows that to happen. You got to have some theory of the case that says, here's how we're going to go from point A to point B. And without that, it's just sort of like a lot of other things in Washington, a good idea that will go nowhere. I used to work at General Motors, and Bob Lutz was one of our famous outspoken leaders, and he said one time, doing certain things is like trying to solve the obesity problem by having clothes manufacturers only make small clothes. And, getting up here and suggesting that agencies should do this or that or the other thing without the enabling mechanism, I think is the equivalent. Let's just make clothes smaller and we'll solve all of our problems. I haven't missed many meals. I'm not looking forward to that day if that should happen. So let's talk about what our theory of the case is. In our theory of the case, because we all realize we want to get to cloud, we want to get to a better place where we have fewer data centers, we want to have more efficient spend, we want to have a whole bunch of things. But what I know after a year and a half is we're not going to get there if I have to go tin cup around to 7,000 different programs and say, everybody donate a little blood here to make this happen. It's way too time consuming, and the chances of success are like really, really small. Even if everybody agrees that it's the right thing to do, which I think we actually have broad agreement on that. That's why we've proposed the IT Modernization Fund. And the program is very simple. We've asked Congress for $3.1 billion. It's a one-time ask. It would go into a fund that agencies or groups of agencies can band together and develop a business case apply for funding from this. If approved, they would get incremental funding as they hit key milestones and deliverables in a very incremental, fast and agile sort of way. And then when the thing goes live or starts delivering capability, they'd be asked to pay back the fund. And it could be from savings from their legacy systems. It could be from data center closures that happen as a result of the work that they're doing, or it could come from any number of different sources. But payback is important here, and it's not a thing that most of my federal cousins are used to. It's probably the thing that's raised most of the questions, like that's a foreign concept to us. But it's an idea borrowed from the private sector. If you're a CIO in any kind of large company, public company, you have to go to the capital committee for any large investment that you want to make, and you have to make a business case, and you have to say, here's why we're doing this. And you have to secure the commitment of the leadership of that organization that this is one of our highest priority things to do. And most importantly, you have to convince that leadership team that not only is this worth it, but it's so worth it that you're going to pay back in the form of depreciation or amortization over time, that there's a real business case there to do what it is you're proposing to do. Now, I know that scares a bunch of my federal friends, but let me give you a theory of the case of why I think it's not actually going to be a problem. Moore's Law was mentioned a few minutes ago. And the basic premise of Moore's Law is that about every 18 months or so, historically, you've gotten double the number of transistors on a chip for approximately the same cost. Now, it doesn't quite equate to double compute power, but, you know, it's pretty significant. Again, I've developed a rule of thumb that basically takes Moore's Law and combines it with storage and networking advancements and, you know, the whole ecosystem. And what I've figured out is about every 5 years, oops, I'm messing the microphone up. About every 5 years, you can get double for your money what you got 5 years earlier. So for that $1,000 invested, in 5 years, you can get double the storage, network, compute that you could have gotten 5 years earlier. And you'll still pay that same $150 to $200 maintenance for that doubled capacity. Now, I'm not going to ask any of you to be math wizards here. This is simple, almost checkbook kind of math. If in a federal agency you've missed out on multiple 5-year upgrade opportunities, two things are true. One is you're probably still paying the $150 to $250 to keep that diminished capacity going. And you've missed out on an opportunity to consolidate and give your agency or your organization a lot more capacity, a lot more capability. And it's all because we don't have a way of funding the upgrade or replacement of the systems that were put in the early days of automation. And of course, the world has changed. We're now in the world of digitization. Digitization is the reimagining of all those business processes to take advantage of this boundaryless world that we have with respect to data and information. And a lot of our data is locked up in analog silos, bound by organizational charts, funding models, and old historic ways of doing governance that just don't work well in the digital world. So the ITMF is there to embrace a couple of concepts. One is promoting and encouraging and funding cross-agency, shared, modern methods. It could be public cloud, private cloud, hybrid cloud, but we're going to grade or value proposals that take advantage of more modern approaches much more highly than anything that's just a lift and shift of existing technology. We're going to look at things that contribute to a greater cybersecurity posture through those methods and grade those efforts high, and reward agencies and proposals that take advantage of those things. And as I said, we'll look at the business case, where there are potential for real savings and a commitment to pay back the fund. And that commitment's important for another reason, is that it commits management to the program and to the success of the project. In today's get it and forget it funding world, I think you don't get that to the degree that it's needed. Today, once you've got the money, and your attention turns to something else. But in a world where you get the money, but you got to pay it back, and you got to pay it back through the successful execution of that program, you can bet we're going to get more attention on that kind of a program. So that piece is important. And it's important for another reason. If the fund gets repaid, that capital can be used to reinvest in the next set of things that need upgrading and replacing. And the end game here, ultimately, is a continuous refresh, continuous upgrade model, where we realize we're never done. That every 5 years, we should be surfing the wave of the technology advantages that come along through all of the great technology providers that support the federal government and our economy. Now, these are relatively simple concepts in some sense, but they're not a part and parcel of the way we do things today. And I think those are some of the most significant changes I hope to see and bring about as we go down this journey together. Does that make sense? Do you have a better understanding of why we're where we are? You think this is the right answer? If you don't, I'm actually open to any other ideas. I'm hoping that this is the right approach. I'm pretty confident it is. It's the best thing that I can think of at this particular point, working with a pretty broad team. And I know we're going to have to make adjustments, and we're going to have to do things, as we learn and as we go. Do we need better FedRAMP? Absolutely. But it's time to start exercising the muscle. It's not time to sit on our hands. It's time to get moving. It's time to declare that status quo is unacceptable, and here's what I'm going to do about it in my role, whatever that is. And so again, I thank you for your support in this important area. But let's ride that wave, the every 5-year thing, and I know we're going to end up in a better place. It's the most important thing I think we can do to make our government more relevant, to serve our citizens better, to make the federal government a more attractive place to work, and in any capacity, and particularly in IT. So thank you so much. I appreciate all the support for people wanting me to hang around and so on. That really feels good. I will tell you, in answer to the question, I'll anticipate, I haven't made up my mind yet. First of all, you've got to be asked to stay by somebody who can make that decision. And I think it's premature for that question to be asked. So I'm not focused on it, but what I will tell you is, no matter what happens, I'm committed to staying active in this really important question, and I'm committed to being whatever influence I can be to help move this along. I see this as both the opportunity and the challenge of a lifetime, and I take it seriously. I think once you've been in this role, you owe it to continue and help progress the journey, and you have my commitment that I'll absolutely do that, no matter what happens, even if it is Mr. Trump. So, but anyhow, thank you for all your support.